everybody. I don't know how many people are on here yet, but I'll just start off by giving a couple seconds for hopefully more and more people to join and join us here. I will share that I'm super excited to kind of kick off something that's honestly been in the making for at least 2 to 3 years for me. And we just thought that it was an ideal time to do this. You know, one, obviously we're in a really strange time in history and we're in a really critical time in terms of this week and it being election week. But it's definitely been some time in the making, and I think it's been valuable time, not only coming up with countless topics for what will now evolve to become a Hot Topics channel, combination of both Facebook Live as well as publishing on YouTube. So definitely follow me, here either on Facebook Live. Feel free to share and invite other folks, but then also I'll be providing information as well in terms of my YouTube channel and be able to follow me there as well. So, I'm definitely, again, excited to just kick this thing off. Timing was intentional. Timing was specific in that, I felt like now more than ever to create opportunities and forums where people can feel comfortable, sharing their perspectives, having opinions, and know that it's okay to disagree and it's not about disrespect. It's okay to not make it about somebody being right and somebody being wrong. That it's really just about a desire and a willingness to gain some understanding on other people's views. And with that understanding and the openness to understanding will help us continue to move forward together as human beings, and also certainly in business. Now, obviously, a lot of what I'm going to be discussing, at least here on Facebook or anything you see come up on my company website, is going to tend to be more, business driven. I've run my company, Antony International Solutions, now for 8 years. Hard to believe that we are 8 years into it now with an incredible team right along with me as we've gone through our evolution of building out what we refer to as flex recruiting services, an innovative model to recruiting services that, as much as people try to box us in, does not exist. It is absolutely 100% a new innovative approach to recruiting in the market. So that has been the focus for the last 8 years, that in addition to being a mom of 4, and 4 little ones, and you can imagine the year that my husband and I have had managing all of that. So again, super timely, but very thoughtful. And now on top of it, we actually, with my company, we've been running a series that is about challenges and solutions during, for companies during this time in the pandemic. So all of this coming together, and I just thought it was perfect to kick off a kind of interesting hot topic that'll maybe raise a few eyebrows and go, what's this all about? What does she mean? And the name of this vlog is actually called Leadership is to Blame. So, I'll get into why, hopefully. And the way that this is going to work is I'm going to have 4 main points. I got my handy cameraman here, Kristen, and she's on the other side of this. I'm not reading comments as they come in. I'm not reading questions. I'm kind of letting her manage that side of it so I don't look like one of those weirdo vloggers that are like, trying to scan through comments to talk at the same time. But what we will have is 4 topics. Feel free to comment away or ask questions in the comments about these 4 different points. And then between each point, I'm going to take a quick pause. I'm going to check in with Kristen, see if there's any questions that have come up or any valid points that we should bring up. She'll read them out, and then we'll kind of move quickly on to the next item. So my first topic, or my first point, is pretty loaded. And what it refers to is corporate America, and certainly I'll throw government into this, has an aversion to remote working, and this was certainly pre-COVID, and it's certainly now. Innovative workforce management as a second part of that. And then third, trust. We have an aversion to trust in corporate America. We have an aversion to trust in our government. And so as we look at these 3 separate but yet incredibly linked items, I want to start this off and talk about and lead to why, in my opinion, leadership is to blame. The reality is that there is always opportunities, especially in business, where we can be innovative, we can be strategic, we can be forward thinking, not just sit back in what we want to coin as traditionalism and say, well, this is the way it's always done, why change it? And this is a huge, huge problem that's happening in corporate America. It's certainly an even more bigger problem that's happening in government, this idea that we should just keep going the way things have always been done. And I certainly ran into this, the fact that 8 years ago when I started my company, it was remote working from moment one. It was remote working in the early days of just getting started with, doing video. In terms of calling, it was at the beginning stages of starting to figure out cloud-based live tools. Nonetheless, still did it successfully. What we do today is obviously a hyper version of that in terms of efficiency, but nonetheless, it still happened. It obviously positioned us in a perfect way to be long ahead of the curve compared to a lot of companies when it came to us going into a quarantine and having to be 100% remote working. But the point is, it's been possible for companies for a long time, but I can't tell you countless companies that I either worked for or worked with that absolutely had an aversion to remote working. And it was really leaving the responsibility on the employee population, on people to kind of prove that they were trustworthy enough to work remotely. And all the while not getting creative with their workforce management model. Still managing workforce as if, hey, it's a traditional 40-hour work week, it's a traditional in and around 9 to 5, and giving meaningfulness behind bodies just being at an office and being physically present. And so for me, I look at this and I say, again, this is a good foundational piece to talk about the aversion to remote working, the aversion to innovative workforce management, and the aversion most of all to trust. So that's point one, and I'm going to sit that there and just check in with Kristen here. Okay, so no questions, no comments on that. We're going to keep plugging away here so I don't have to make this video too long. The second item that's on the list here is change is inevitable, folks. By will or by force, change is inevitable. And, again, we can, as leadership in companies, as leadership in our community, as leadership in certainly our government, we can either take a proactive or a reactive approach. And what that really demands is a constant communication at all levels, in all situations, of recognition that really at the end of the day, there's no such thing as over communication. And we also can't be afraid to try and fail. And that trial and failure is a place that allows us to really grow. Our learning comes from that. And it also gives us the ability to kind of tweak as we go along. I mean, any IT expert that would be out there would tell you, you have to go through a process of trial and see what works and what fails in order to figure out how to move on to the next stage in a development process. Well, the same thing certainly happens when it comes to change within a business or any kind of organization. And again, the acceptance of that change it's not just about being okay with it in a reactive way. It's about saying we need change and how do we do it in a proactive way. So maybe we're more prepared for when failure does occur. And we're more prepared to be nimble and agile and be able to work through those problems in a thoughtful and productive way. So that's point number 2. Want to check in? Questions or comments?
Nope.
Alrighty. So point number 3, moving right along. Unfortunately, the reality is for many, change, innovation, remote working, innovative workforce management is absolutely been by force. And i.e. here we are in the middle of a pandemic. And talk about force. Think about how many companies completely avoided remote working and certainly never made it easy on people in terms of giving flexibility around creating their schedule, breaking out of an orthodox schedule and just making it about trusting people to get their job done. And again, it's not about blind trust. Don't get me wrong. There's no place for blind trust in business. It's about trusting in a way that will focus on the reality that every single job out there can be based on productivity. Every responsibility that a person has and the time that they spend doing it can in fact be captured, it can in fact be tracked, and it can in fact give the freedom to your employee or to your team member for that matter, or to people in your community and your organization, the ability to say, I know what I need to do, what my work responsibilities are clear, here's how much time on average it should take me, and I'm going to come up with a game plan every week based on my schedule in order to get that done. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? It's not easy. The reason I know that is because we've been at this in terms of our workforce management for 8 years, and every single week that I articulately walk through it and come up with a plan is a huge challenge. So don't think for 1 second that it's easy. However, nonetheless, I do it. And I do it because efficiency matters to me. I do it because transparency matters to me. I do it because I trust my team to get it done. And so again, the unfortunate reality is that now companies, organizations as a whole, community, school, government has been forced into change, has been forced into, in many cases, remote working, has been forced to get creative with their workforce management, but it's all reactive. And now we're in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of change, forced change, and we're in the middle of trying and failing at the worst time possible, right? Obviously not the best situation. But nonetheless, I think what employers and leadership in any company is unfortunately coming to the reality is, guess what? Those folks that were in the office, maybe they even pretended to work long days and they spent 2, 3, 4 hours a day playing Tetris and on Facebook and Instagramming and hanging out and taking long lunches and hanging out with their coworkers and having unnecessary meetings. All that stuff can happen in person or it can happen remote working. So that's point 3. I'll pause there.
We are good. You can keep rolling.
Awesome. Last but not least is leadership is frustrated, probably now more than ever. They're flailing around. Maybe some leadership is like deer in headlights and laying down and praying that it's all going to come to an end sometime soon. As a result of this frustration, as a result of being reactive and not really sure knowing what to do, they become, instead of becoming more flexible, they become more demanding. They become less understanding. They become, maybe in some cases, even paranoid. Are people working? And now they're trying to implement in the worst possible time and really in an impossibility, some kind of micromanagement structure in the midst of all of this craziness happening right now. And here's the thing. You can feel frustrated. You can look at this and go, shoulda, coulda, woulda. You can sit here and pray that it's all going to end sometime soon. It doesn't change the reality of what's happening. But until there's accountability in leadership and that they look at themselves hard and they go, man, we are to blame. We are to blame for not being proactive. We are to blame for not being more strategic, embracing technology instead of having an aversion to it. Looking at, for example, instead of being so critical of younger generations and claiming that younger generations are somehow lazy because they happen to be smarter and more efficient and faster at what they do in their job, and instead embracing that reality, and saying, man, this is awesome. It's awesome to figure out that from a productivity perspective, to be faster and smarter is actually a good thing. To embrace technology is actually a good thing. To find creative ways is a good thing. So again, the reality is now that we live in is leadership, whether they want to take accountability right now across the board in any single format, is to blame if in fact this is the situation that they're sitting in. A situation lacking trust, a situation, reacting to remote working, how to deal with productivity, how to deal with communication, how to deal with workforce management. If this is a situation that these companies are in, leadership should not be bringing that back to their employee population and trying to apply more pressure or somehow expect them to fix it. They're going to have to take a good hard look, take accountability for their lack of planning and their lack of proactivity, and then from there have the patience to say, this is not a temporary change. We have to work towards permanent change. Our permanent change has to be constantly evolving and moving forward and not backwards. If we do this across the board and every business looks at this and says, there are no limits. There are no limits in my team. There are no limits in my business because something's been done a certain way forever. Why are we limiting ourselves in this day and age with the technology and the resources that we have? Let go, be limitless, create opportunities to reinvent yourself, take advantage of situations like this, become more efficient, find opportunities to train and develop and tap into people's skill sets. Stop being complacent. If you do that, I promise you, your team and everybody that's relying on you will come right along with you in that same way. And believe me, whatever you thought was great pre-COVID and pre-pandemic could have the potential of being a million times better post, because that's the new normal and it's coming whether we want it or not. And in that new normal, we can have a rebirth of some incredibly new and amazing things. So that about covers it. I'm gonna just check in, okay, and just call it a wrap here on our first vlog session. Again, went Facebook Live on this one. We'll also be publishing it out. I'll get some information out there about following my YouTube channel. Obviously, for AnthonyInternationalSolutions.com is our website. You can also follow me on Instagram. My handle on there is MomMogul4. You can find me on there. That's also going to be my handle on YouTube. And again, thank you so much for anybody that takes the time to listen to this. Thank you in advance for anybody who might have comments to share on any one of those forums. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys very soon.
Tyler, actually, before you wrap up, had something that he wanted to ask.
Great.
He said, for a long time, it seemed like remote working was the next step. Now that we have largely been pushed into that reality across the country, what do you think would be the next big step?
I really think it does have to do, actually, once people do adapt in a more permanent way to remote working, the next logical step is actually in and around workforce management. It is going to be a reality that you can't expect that old methodologies of workforce management when you were in a traditional in-office environment is going to work in a remote environment. And again, it's probably going to go through a lot of trial and error to get there. And it's more than likely going to have to be a unique solution based on the industry, based on the size of your team. But all of those things are going to have to be considered. So I would say that that's probably the next big step in innovative change within the corporate world.
And then Phil Rivera said, great Facebook Live. Thanks, Angela.
Thanks, Phil. And awesome. Well, thank you guys. I thank you for everybody's time, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.